Thanks very much for having us, Stephen. It's really lovely to be here. Just to give you a wee overview of who we are, because we are quite a motley crew tonight. There are 6 of us in total. Ken will be the one who comes flying in really late at the end. Not a bad timekeeper, but he's reading elsewhere before, so he's going to do the double tonight. Hopefully to bring any football results that have transpired by that stage with him. We are all part of a thing called ACES, the Artists Career Enhancement Scheme, which is funded by Arts Council NI. So we've been given a substantial chunk of money this year, which we can use in a creative project or to buy nice socks or whatever we justify to the Arts Council. So there are a number of writers here who are working across different genres. You may hear things that are not particularly your style, and some bits will appeal to you more, but it's like a little smorgasbord of what we have to offer as a group of writers. We, much like an Olympic relay team, will just hand the baton one on to the other, and we'll each explain who we are. So I shall be back later, and I memorised the order and I've forgotten it. Up first is the indescribable Nathaniel Joseph Macaulay.
I was really looking forward to this reading. I was really not. I'm still looking forward to it. There's something about PRONI. Is it this new regeneration round the leg? It's just so beautiful. It's a lovely walk down from my home. I live in Nathaniel Joseph Macaulay. At the moment, I am writing a new small chapbook of poetry. The chapbook takes place in the Garden of Eden. And it's written in the voice of Adam. It's written shortly after God finishes talking to him, shortly after the great naming of all the animals, and before Eve arrives. So it's Adam trying to understand Eden in terms of empirical data. The Book of Adam. Empirical Eden. The sea on X falls flush to the sky on Y at 0, fluxing in meters, -5 to 5 in storms of Beaufort 7, 4 at Beaufort 6, 3 at Beaufort 5, etc. Assuming that 0 is constant. 0 isn't constant. Ex nihilo, it's Latin for from nowhere, from dust. I should just explain before I start here. A rachis is the little vein that runs up the middle of a feather, the kind of the main branch of a feather. And the plural of it is rachites. Through some miscalculation, an amberjack has cleared his mark and landed from the river, a firmamental breach and boarding of a moon. Watch the steam amnesiac dispel the dregs of home. The hysterics of his clicking tongue, catching in its own device, finding that his missing lungs are sacks to keep him buoyant. Beneath his fitted foils of skin, his unpinned works part along construction lines and break down to flanks of meat and soft oiled components. All globule bulbs and over-elongated tracts, his numerable bones, his amphitheater chest, his knuckle-notch vertebrae, fan display of rachites. Aside, Titus floods the Colosseum. With the navy for the populace regarded as un-Roman, slave dog lake performances of skirmishes with Carthage were little more than pantomimes to test the fleets for flaws in tarring. Inside the theatre, the ships, now flat bilged and built to scale, even if unwitnessed, this, the start of a week of games, the crowd placating spectacle is purely architectural. The sand, after draining, a souvenir of water. So we're back in the Garden of Eden now. The epigraph reads, Flood Auditorium. The first rain comes not from an upturned jug, but as if sieved through spans of trees or run down off the bulk of fish. The flooding of the river is the cave-in of the cellar, thunder and run away of the world. So at the moment, Adam experiences the first rain, and then the river goes into spate, instead of realising it's the river swelling, he thinks it's the land receding. So the next couple of poems is him trying to prevent the water from washing away, and he does this by tying a rope in between two large rocks. Erotics. Erotic is a type of rock that doesn't fit in the rest of the landscape. It arises from glacial movement. Consider below the upturned wheel, picked clean, its open-mouthed ribs near a full of planet, rupturing in columned rock and jet sand stack, obeliskal moorings, run a sternum made of rope between two correspondents, alleviate the spine, prevent the world from tearing. This is my final poem. Thank you so much for listening. I really enjoyed it. This is called Lariat. Lariat's the Spanish name for a lasso. A gun congeals between the rocks and the orbit of the ropes and teagues with the bonehead shocks of coral. Both knots bow to the slackening belly, dipped in, green and fat with algae. The weight of water overchokes the collar and all is lost to sea. Each end's braid, splayed crooked as ginger, the corresponding forms of triplets recalling the womb. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Pauline Burgess and I am a writer as well as a teacher. I've been teaching in a high school in County Down for 22 years. During that time, my teaching has fed my writing. Children's literature has always been my first love, although in the 12 years that I've been writing seriously, I have written short stories for adults, I've written poetry, I've written drama. But I'm very pleased to say that the first book in my new series for children was launched last Saturday. And this series is aimed at 5 to 8-year-olds. Now, perhaps some of you here aren't au fait with children's literature, but hopefully you'll bear with me tonight when I read the first chapter of my new book. The ACES award that I received has enabled me to go part-time in my teaching career next year, so it's given me the financial space and time to concentrate a little bit more on my writing. So Pony Pals Camp is the first in the series. The series is called Pony Friends Forever, and it's based on a real riding stables near where I live, where my daughter goes riding, lessons riding stables outside Carryduff. The ponies are real, the human characters are absolutely fictional. So chapter 1, this is Barney. Monday morning, first thing. They call me Bronco Barney here at the Pony Palace, just because I like to buck a little now and again. Kate says I'm not going to be used in any more beginner's rides until I learn my lesson. Kate owns this riding school, and she's pretty cool most of the time. Barney, you kick, you take off, you rear up, I've had enough. All you have to do is walk around the arena and go into trot when you're told to. Stop acting like you belong to some rodeo show in the Wild West. Summer camp starts today, and I just can't have you behaving like this. She's exaggerating, of course. Kate wants us all to be so careful with the kids, but hey, who doesn't like a bit of fun? I'm sure their mums and dads love to see some action. I definitely don't want to miss summer camp though, so I better pull my invisible socks up and put my best hoof forward. Well, all four of them, I suppose. Who's a naughty boy then, says Olivia, one of the volunteers here at the Pony Palace. It's not really a palace, of course, but that's what Kate likes to call it. It's such a special place for her and for us ponies too, so sometimes we really do feel like royalty. If you don't watch out, Barney, Kate won't allow you to join camp this morning, Olivia is saying. You'll be stuck in your stable and bored, bored, bored. And whose fault will it be? Yours, you daft pony. I may be unpredictable, but I am not daft, thank you very much. I jerk my head up on purpose so she can't get my head collar off, that'll teach her. Barney, honestly, I don't know why Kate puts up with you. Because, my dear, unlike you, Kate understands ponies. She loves each one of us, warts and all. And she may be a bit upset with me now and again, but she would never, ever get rid of me. Honestly, the cheek of her. I toss my head to show my disgust. She's 14 years old, for goodness sake. Does she think I'm going to take a scolding from a youngster like her? Stand still, you stubborn pony. How am I supposed to groom you properly? Look at you. You're so covered in dry mud that I can hardly even see what colour you are. So I swish my tail to annoy her just a little bit more. Just because we live in a palace, these volunteers expect us all to be princes and princesses. Well, I'm not. I'm a big, strong Welsh pony with a mind of my own, so live with it, girlie. Well, I'm biggish. We don't have enough ponies for camp, Kate shouts in suddenly. All the other beginners' ponies are in use, so I'm going to have to use Barney again. Can you tack him up, Olivia? Kate's long red hair is plaited under a baseball cap, but some of it's coming loose because she's been running around so much. I knew I wouldn't be out of action for long, I just knew it. Then she comes in to speak to me. Barney, you will do exactly as you are told, got it? Well, go on then, I'll try, I snort back. This is the first day of camp, and I need you to be perfectly behaved. I'm relying on you. Are you sure about this? Asks Olivia, who clearly thinks that Kate is mad. I allow Olivia to tack me up, and I don't even try to blow out my tummy when she tightens my girth. I let her clip on a leading rein, and she walks me outside where a little girl with a thick fringe is crying. I don't want him, she complains as soon as she sees me. He bucks and kicks. It's all right, Holly. I'm taking your ride today, so I'll make sure you're okay, Kate tells her. Barney, meet Holly Hill. Holly, meet Barney, who can be a real sweetie when he tries really hard. Kate says these last few words while giving me the scariest, meanest stare ever. Really, Kate? I got the picture, I Winnie. Holly Hill, on the other hand, isn't so convinced. As we walk into the arena, Holly starts wailing, Mom, I really don't want Barney. Her mom, who's in the viewing gallery, looks worried, but there's not a lot she can do. She knows it's me or no one. For goodness sake, I think to myself, just get on. Kate gives Holly a leg up, knots my reins to make them shorter, and adjusts the stirrups so that they're the right length. The child continues to whimper and blubber, and I'm actually beginning to fancy the idea of going back to my stable. Enough of the racket, little girl, you're making my ears hurt, I Winnie. All right, walk on, Kate shouts, and off we go. All the ponies walking around the arena, one behind the other. Of course, I'm kept right at the back because I'm a kicker. Well, wouldn't you kick if you felt another pony's nose sniffing your bottom? Holly, you're doing really well, Kate tells her. Now just sit up straight and tighten your reins. Good girl. Give Barney a little squeeze with your legs. That's it, not too hard. I can feel her glaring at me as if to say, don't you take off, Buster. The little girl is shivering with nerves, so I'm not going to do that to her now, am I? They all think I'm heartless round here, but I'm not. And besides, I really want to be part of summer camp, so just watch me be as good as gold. That's right, Bronco Barney will be the politest pony in the Pony Palace. I hold up my head so that everyone can see the white blaze that runs from between my eyes down to my nose, and I say to myself, you can do it, Barney. You'll show them. I feel Holly Hill relax into her saddle just the teeniest little bit above me. Thank you.
My name is Anthony Quinn. I'm going to read a little extract from The Blood Dim Tide, which will be published in October by No Exit Press. It's a mystery story which also examines the famous Irish poet's obsession with ghosts. It was because of an eccentric Irish poet residing in London during the third year of the Great War that I became a ghost catcher, a post that had me alternating my evenings between titled hostesses' dinner parties in Mayfair and Chelsea and hushed seances in grimy parlours of the capital's more humble streets. Both worlds had their own ingrained horror. At that time, London was in the throes of a supernatural paroxysm, but gigantic towers called skyscrapers soared into the air one after another in bright cities on the other side of the Atlantic. Across the English capital, fantastic energies were equally at work, only on a more ethereal plane. After more than 1,000 days of war, grieving wives and mothers returning in their droves to seances and a host of different spiritualist movements, searching for messages from their lost husbands and sons. Less than 70 miles away in France, men with grimy uniforms exhaled their final breaths in foxholes and filthy burrows, while back home lights were dimmed in sitting rooms as anxious relatives took up their listening posts. Mediums, mesmerizers and hypnotists emerged from the back streets with all manner of theatrical props, Ouija boards, moving tables, listening trumpets, mysterious lights, magic lanterns and crystal balls, all to help the population confront its grief and feed an insatiable desire for contact with the other world. London at the dawn of 1918 was a city burdened with grief, while I was a 24-year-old medical student given that rare chance afforded to unhappy youth, the opportunity to follow someone who believed in the extraordinary. After studying the human body and all its known diseases for 3 years at the city's University College Hospital, I longed for the magical simplicity with which I had seen things at the age of 5. I mourned the ignorance I had left behind and all that I barely understood before my world had been blinded by the rigors of science and all its enshrined explanations of the universe. The object of my devotion, my leader in the spiritual quest, was a celebrated poet and mystic who at that time presided over a shambling crowd of artists, spiritualists and mediums that congregated in the dusty halls of the British Library and drab clubs along Kingsway. I had grown tired of my fellow students and their indifference to the mysteries of life, heartless men who would never learn to see that life was magical. So obsessed were they with their material possessions, their occupations, and their expectations of city life. So when this free-thinking genius of an Irishman spoke one evening in a university reading room and described how it was possible for the mind to travel through space without leaving the body, that he had observed castles adrift in the air, that cards decorated with ancient symbols told secret stories of the human heart, and that our spiritual companions floated beside us in an aquamarine sea of ether, I seized the chance to pledge myself to a secret society devoted to the occult. I had witnessed enough bodily suffering. Instead, I wished to feast on the beautiful terrors of the invisible world. This was how, on the 12th of February 1918, I and Edward Dulac, the painter and fairy tale illustrator, came to be hurrying after the tall, animated figure of William Butler Yeats as he dissolved into the murky vapours of a freezing London evening. Perhaps it was my overheated imagination, but I believed I could detect the sound of invisible wings beating around us as we hastened along Holborn Street. In the distance we could hear the haunting sounds of foghorns rising from the slow-flowing Thames, and the piercing cries of horses whipped on by their drivers on the capital's busy thoroughfares. A thick fog had descended over the city's great river and its environ. Dimly lit lampposts loomed before us like the blackened stumps of trees in no man's land. The clatter of cantering hooves sounded close by on cobbles, but their source was invisible. Even the dogs we met were huddled together for comfort. I ran ahead of Dulac, anxious that the poet might disappear through the door into a mystical world and leave us behind in a city that in its grief had succumbed not just to fog but to collective blindness. However, Yeats walked faster than I'd ever seen any person walk. So fast he seemed more a wraith than a man. He did not need to consult a map. He seemed to know the murky side streets of the city the way a boat's navigator knows a river. He knew by instinct where the dark banks of houses twisted left or right, or plunged completely from view into rubbled wasteland or rat-infested marsh. For him there was no fog, just a bright sense of his own elation as he hurried towards his destination. We struggled desperately to stay up with him, especially Dulac, who was neither lean nor tall, but the mist kept congealing around Yeats's shadowy figure. Every now and again he stopped, but as soon as we caught up with him, he would take off before we had time to catch our breath. "Stay with me," he shouted. The frenzy of the supernatural pursuit had entirely consumed his patience. He had the look of a man prepared to knock on every door of the city in search of a portal to the other world. Thank you.
Hi folks, good evening. Matt Kirkham. I'm a poet and I'm going to be reading some poems here. The work that I'm doing as part of this Arts Council ACES scheme is around the life of a mathematician called Kurt Gödel. So a lot of these poems, they're either biographical ones or they relate to maths in some way. We've already had relating to maths in some way here from the thing, and we with the very first one that you read. So we'll see how we go. Amongst the corals. This is not a biographical one about Kurt Gödel, just to say that. Amongst the corals, like all men, he craves simplicity. He goes night snorkeling amongst the corals in the just past full flood, when somehow they know, through their hermaphrodite enlightenment, the right time to set free perfect bubbles of sperm, eggs at their cores, to float up through the tide to the moon. However much he tries, he can't deny that first chemical cause. Something sort of in his pulse is catching at the back of his mind. No, the knuckle of his big toe scraping the coral. Envious, bleeding, holding his breath, he hangs like an inverted question mark. Pipistrelle. Turning from pissing into the hedge in the still half-light, he blinked to freeze that snap on his retina, the predatory fetch of webbed flight. Before it jagged and veered and brushed his left shoulder, he stood and gaped. The fly who thought she'd made her escape tickled the back of his throat. I'll read one which is set in Vienna. Gödel was an Austrian mathematician and did his kind of groundbreaking work in Vienna in the 30s, but that was a time of great and terrible political upheaval. He married a nightclub dancer called Adela, much to the chagrin of his family. It was not an approved marriage at all. this is an incident going pretty naive about politics, pretty naive about everything, I think. But this was an incident which really provoked Gödel and Kurt and Adela to flee Austria. Adela's umbrella went dancing like a wild dancer in a moth from the crown of one young Nazi to strike another's mouth. Kurt, why must you always be Mr. Y? My mother's name for me. Adela was so graceful, lifting my spectacles from the gutter. So Kurt and Adela, they fled from Austria and in the end settled in Princeton in the States. Einstein became a good friend of Gödel's there. One thing that Gödel used to do is take nighttime walks along the coast. And this is a poem about that. And this has a kind of mathematical idea in it, which is the idea of recursion, which in maths is used to relate to things like, the picture, the optical illusion of, is it a candlestick or is it two faces facing each other? So you've got, the background and the object both mean something, okay? So then that gets applied to things like set theory and so on. So this is recursion. This is how the waves foliate their westward progression from a sinusoidal waltz to a baroque jitterbug. Zero, successor of zero, successor of successor of zero. They catch on the sunrise as it breaks the horizon before they break on the shore. Gödel assesses the order of the set of elements. The air also moves towards the beach. It pulls under the waves, where the recursion foams and fills its bronchi. It sucks downwards, it crunches on the shingle. Wave and not wave, A and not A, he tries them. Air, Adela, apple, apfel, antiphon, afterthought. One of the things I'm doing, I'll say I'm doing with the award, it's not really a financial thing actually, but in my case, I'm getting into email correspondences with mathematicians and trying out my poems on them, saying, does this relate to the mathematical ideas? If you've got the backing of something like the Arts Council, you don't sound like some random nutter when you do that. So it's a great advantage, so it's very handy. I'll read a couple more. Long multiplication. I am snug in the tautologies which make up the placenta, shaped like a self-mirroring curlicue brackets around the set of all sets which do not contain themselves. Out of these paradoxes I somersault with long multiplication, making her head spin. Her belly's under her school desk, swelling after her 14th summer. Swelling after her 14th summer, her belly under her school desks, making her head spin with long multiplication. I somersault out of these paradoxes which do not contain themselves, around the set of all sets, shaped like the self-mirroring curlicue brackets which make up my placenta. I am snug in the tautologies. Thanks, everybody. I'll read just one more here. I've been surrounded by all the weight of, I kind of sort of feel it, the weight of all the history in this place. It's quite something. This is something from my family history, relatively recent family history. It's a true event that I had to excuse this poem to my father the other day when we first did a reading. It's called The Writer's Mother. The writer's mother turns in her slow-mo sleep. Holding hands, you, the readers, are watching each hair separate from its neighbours as she pivots anti-clockwise like a hand in a mirror in a dream. The two of you step forward. The A-road, with its sedative, wave-like rhythm, its lefts and rights, is not worth your attention, nor the Norton they were riding, nor the rider's father who miscounted exits from the roundabout and leapt into the curve that was not there. She was already asleep and dreaming. See how her fingers follow her wrist, how her wrist follows her elbow, and her elbow her shoulder. She is at shoulder height, sleeping, caressing the air, flying through late summer 1963. Step forward. The hand you are holding is childlike, trusting, hungry, thin. Follow her fingertips as she flies. Can you predict her landing on the Timothy, Betch, cowslips? She'll one day teach her children to know a name, unharmed. Thanks.
Hiya, I'm Jan Carson. It's nice to be back here. I am using my money from the ACES scheme for a bit of self-indulgence. If anybody knows me, I'm a Mad Dylan fan. And my next novel I'm working on, it's set in Ballymena, but it's quite a bit of it is about Bob Dylan's early childhood, so you can join the dots there any way you want. And I'm going to be taking 3 months out of my day job beginning on August the 1st and travelling over to the Midwest of America for most of September and October to immerse myself in Bob. So I may not actually come back again. I'm going to Hibbing, Duluth, Minneapolis, Woodstock, Greenwich Village. It's going to be a pilgrimage of greatness. So that's what I'm spending all of your money on. But before that, just to prove I am who I say I am, I've also written another book here. This is Malcolm Orange Disappears. It came out last Wednesday. It's a bit of a, I still can't believe I'm holding it at this stage. So I want to read you a little section from it tonight. I'm not even going to try and explain where this comes in. Flying children are a big part of this book. Really, you have to suspend disbelief when you dip into Malcolm. And the flying children, they represent this idea of transience and wanting to run away and always being rootless and homeless. So there are a lot of crazy metaphors in this book, but they all relate into the plot. And I'm just going to read you a section, which I wanted to prove that I actually am a proper writer, because these guys have done loads of proper historical research. I just made all this up. And we're in PRONI tonight, so this is the only tiny little bit that I even used Wikipedia for, which is not even proper historical research, really. So this is the part. The flying children have been sent in the 40s over to America to help with the war effort. They're from a town called Jefferson, Oklahoma, and I think that's all you need to know, so we'll just read. Trailing the trip ships across the Atlantic, the flying children soon forgot Jefferson. They looked the stratosphere, swinging low to brush the bearded undulations of the waves, and like Noah's raven, returned by night to sleep as kidney beans curled together in one of the ship's many lifeboats. Only the highest in command had been informed of their existence. The ordinary soldiers, many of whom had never crossed state lines, excused the children when they appeared in telescopes and binocular sights as strange birds peculiar to the continental drift. The children revelled in the open sky. They flew like fighter pilots and dined like demigods on tinned fruit and Hershey bars. Recalling the claustrophobic fields and streets of Jefferson, Oklahoma, they could only conclude that their parents were selfish creatures, denying them the full breadth of their prodigal wings. By the time they hit Europe, all 7 children had lost their instinct to return home. The ship stopped in Belfast in January 26, 1942, and while the regular troops tripped through the city exploring the public houses and dance halls, the children made darting exploratory flights through the glens of Antrim and the Newry Hills, thrilled by the jungling foliage and lush greens. Accustomed to the flat Oklahoma plains, everything seemed damp, pocket-sized and saturated in colour. Such a small island, the children mused, no bigger than a single state. Yet this tiny teaspoonful of a tiny continent served to whet their appetites for further adventures. In the early days, Europe felt like a homecoming for the children. The streets ran thick with mythical stories, monsters, angels, immortal beings. For one short instance, the flying children felt almost acceptable. America was a youngster, too efficient to argue after unbelievable legends. No one had ever celebrated the children for their oddities. Huddling for the night in barns and rural barracks, they began to speak healing words over each other. Lucky and blessed and terribly, terribly fortunate. The squat syllables rocking them into deep, satisfying sleep. It was only months later, flying low over Dachau and Buchenwald and Auschwitz, that the children came to understand the dark mission which had drawn them so far from home. They began to reimagine their parents as saints and prophets, their small, suffocating town a haven of quiet sense. Eyes full of impossible suffering, they hid behind their camera lenses, snapping children, adults, and old people reduced to bone and paper. Each silent flight became an opportunity to repent. No longer blessed, no longer lucky, no longer baptized by good fortune, the children grew heavier with every sad mission. Afterwards, without consulting, 2 of the 7 attempted to claw themselves free of their wings. A third, under the mistaken assumption that this might instigate blindness, rubbed vinegar in her own eyes. All but the child given to localized hysterics lost the ability to laugh audibly. All sacrificed their teenage years, tripping straight from child to adult. There were sights and smells so horrific they could never be flown away from. The war ruined the people of Jefferson, Oklahoma. When the prodigal 7 were returned, unceremoniously dumped from a speeding Land Rover, they spiraled into the back fields like wilted sycamore seeds, too limp-witted and exhausted to soar. Over the coming weeks, these children seemed to shrivel into themselves. They suffered from nightmares and panic attacks, dry skin and migraine headaches. Though fully capable of flight, they had no appetite for the heavens. For years, they dragged their unfurled wings behind them, shameful things dripping like the living room curtains from each shoulder. These children amounted to nothing and passed away in early adulthood, too tired to rise in a world so unbearably heavy. The mothers and fathers kicked themselves for their stupidity. They took up arms and rebuilt their defences. Jefferson, Oklahoma became a cold shoulder for strangers, a safe hold for its own. The town adapted to its flying children. Trampolines and straw-stuffed mattresses bloomed at regular intervals along the high street, rain-soaked and ready to cushion the faltering infant flyers. The schoolhouse went unroofed for generations. Impervious to the odd Oklahoma downpour, the classroom ceiling was removed to save the grazed heads and bruised wings of those children too sky-sung to keep their seats for an entire lesson. Younger children, not yet capable of controlling their flighty urges, were often corralled, bound to their bunk beds with belts and laces for their own safety. Locally, such behaviour was considered more prudent than cruel. The modern world, even the idle armpit of Oklahoma, was not best suited to flying children. Dangers lurked in the eaves of taller buildings and overhanging trees. Tragic tales were passed like good luck charms from one generation to the next, keeping even the most formidable kids local and grounded long after the migratory urges kicked in.
Hi everybody, my name's Ken Gregory and I'm the last of the 6 of us, and it's been a real pleasure to be with the 6 of them. I've done a few readings all around the place and it's lovely for you all to come. I'm just actually back from another interview over in Presence Art Centre, and they told me that I would get a parking space here, so they sent me away in a taxi. And I'm looking outside there and I'm thinking, how the hell am I getting back here later? But anyway, so as I said, I'm one of the arts awardees, and I am using my award money to make there's an enhanced ebook of my first novel, The Polaris Whisper. And what I do is I take historical fiction and I mix it with fantasy, so half my book would be truthful and half of it will be made up. So because of the historical connotations in it, they've and the interest generated in it, they want to know where the so what parts of it are real and what parts aren't. And the book is based in Celtic Ireland, 9th century in Norway, and it's been verified by Trinity College for historical accuracy and stuff. And the wee section I'm going to read you here is the opening scene, which is actually a historical event that happened, with a twist, of course. But the actual characters are real characters that lived, and it's set on the coast of Kerry, with Skellig Michael, which somebody's made knows about Heritage Centre. So I'll just read. They're here because of me. The abbot's palm pressed against his chest. All the more reason for you not to face them. They must not find you. But Abbot Ethel interrupted, his voice like his manner serene and soothing. The Lord has chosen a different path for you. He whispered a short blessing, signing the cross as he did so. Now go, he said, turning to join his brethren in the chapel. Every instinct in him rebelled against the abbot's word. He was not one to run from a fight, yet he had to obey. The sound of angry feet and clinking weaponry grew louder. The Norsemen were close. Their noisy ascent had alerted the monks to the raid long before their silhouettes had broken free of the mist that clung to the base of the island. The intruders were making steady progress up the steep rocky steps to the cluster of huts on the top of the island monastery of Skellig. At points along the route, the steps clung precariously to the side of the rock face. The Norsemen had to be careful. One slip would have sent them crashing to their death. Unfortunately, their quarry's delay proved costly. The Norsemen caught a glimpse of him as he scaled the outer wall. With the dawn offering little light, the fugitive had to be vigilant as he ran between the lichen-covered rocks down the steep incline to the cliff top. He could not afford to trip on any of the stones that protruded from the barren soil. In his haste, he stumbled into the burrow of a nesting puffin. The frightened bird took flight, scurrying him witless, the commotion creating a ripple of plumage as puffin after puffin took to the air. Behind, the raiders had cleared the monastery wall. Although tired, having climbed hundreds of steps to the summit, the sighting of their quarry gave them fresh impetus. They jeered and catcalled as their target fell, their Nordic language waking memories of his past. They were here to kill him or bring him home. A shiver ran down his spine as the sound of monks chanting filled the air. He admired their faith. An almost forgotten story came to mind. He had heard the first-hand account of a young monk who, in hiding, had endured the agony of hearing Norsemen butchering his friends. Determined that history would not repeat itself, he resolved to get off the island. To the east, barely visible in the bad lay Gannett Island. The monks kept boats there. If he could swim there, he had a chance of hiding out until nightfall. Then he could use the cover of darkness to row to the southwest coast of Ireland and safety. Reaching the cliff edge, he stared down into a massive precipice. Below, the jagged rocks of the cove raised themselves out of a carpet of fog. It was impossible to judge where the rock ended and water began. He knew that it would take a mammoth leap to reach the ocean. Glancing back, he was not surprised to see that Earl, his oldest foe, had outpaced the rest of the group and was closing rapidly. Taking off his woolen tunic, he skipped onto a protruding ledge and stood motionless, deep in concentration, forgetting momentarily the danger behind him. Closing one eye, the tall Norseman took aim, his action contorting the scar that ran from under his left eye along the side of his nose and down his cheek. With a yell, Earl launched his spear. The haunted man remained focused on the water as he timed the gaps between waves. The spear's course was true. Rocking backwards and forward, the man leapt. The spear pierced him high in his back, and momentum carried him into the ocean.
Attention please. I'm trying to be issued this as soon as possible.
No, there's plenty of time, yeah. I just want to give a wee pause to that announcement, so far. That's good.
As we said, we all use our ACES money in different ways. I'm actually going to read a poem here, so it's just a bit daunting because there's a few proper poets in there, because I'm a novelist. But I've actually been putting together a short collection of poems, and Hopefully they won't rip me too much apart afterwards, but they won't get me because they're nice. This is called And I Tell You That I Love You. As a river, she cascades from a perfect moon, streaming and then meandering in an invisible channel, until halted by the breath of her creator. Or perhaps it is her resilience that defies gravity, for she has an inner strength that refuses to react or yield to the bitterness of my anger. Spent, she now waits, suspended as if by magic, not daring to move, afraid to fall, until a sob of lost resolve melts my temper. Run, rush free, O river of shame. The wiper swishes, the raindrop is displaced, and it is your reflection that I see in the window. Your silent, painful tear falls, and I am ashamed, and I tell you that I love you.